And welcome back to the show, everyone. Brought to you by Casa de Campo in the Dominican Republic. Again, the late, great Pete Dye designed four absolute gems of golf courses. He loved Teeth of the Dog. His ashes are sprinkled on Teeth of the Dog. And oh, by the way, 1976 U.S. Open winner Jerry Pate, our friend, is redoing Teeth of the Dog. It'll reopen in December. But check it out. The other courses are fantastic. It's casadecampo.com in the Dominican Republic. All right, our next guest, and I've been talking about Tommy Roy for weeks now. He's an absolute legend in the sports broadcasting industry, and I've been around a long time, and I really appreciate all that Tommy has done. And I'm telling you, for our listeners and viewers, whether it was the Dream Team, all these U.S. Opens, the Super Bowl with John Elway, I mean, it's crazy. Michael Phelps winning all his medals, Katie Ledecky. And you may remember the announcers, whether it's Dick Enberg or Bob Costas or Marv Albert or Mike Tirico or Dan Hicks, but it's Tommy that's been inside the truck, and it's an absolute honor to have him on the show today. Tommy, great to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm great, Doug. Really appreciate you inviting me on, and got a chance to do a lot of great events through the years.
My goodness, have you ever? It's interesting, and I know you're going to be inducted into World Golf Hall of Fame here in short order, and I know that'll be quite an honor because you love the game more than I do, which is amazing. And when that happens, Tommy, I'm gonna crash the party. I'll be in the back of the room because you mean that much to me, what you've done in your career and all the things that I've watched. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I love the guys that are on camera, but knowing you inside the truck, pretty cool indeed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about getting in the Hall of Fame. I just got into the Broadcasting Hall of Fame, which was quite an honor. And of course, it would be even more meaningful to me to get into the Golf Hall of Fame. My dad was a golf pro, and I grew up around the game. I was in the pro shop every day when I was a little kid, and all the way through high school, and then to luck out and have my business be my my hobby as well. My vocation being my hobby. It's pretty cool. So yeah, if that were to happen someday, that would be off the charts great.
Oh, it will. There's no doubt about it. Hey, I wanted to ask you so many things about the upcoming U.S. Open at Oakmont. Obviously, NBC will be there from start to finish. But you got to take me back. First off, 1994. And you were involved in the NBA Finals, the Rockets and the Knicks, and the O.J. Chase in the Bronco. And at the same time, earlier that day, Tom, Arnold Palmer misses the cut at Oakmont, and it ended a 40-year run for the King playing in the U.S. Open. That interview on ESPN was so emotional. I'll still see it today and get goosebumps. What was that like, knowing your golf history, but you were involved with the NBA game and with the O.J. craziness? I mean, that was one of the most iconic days in not just sports broadcasting, but broadcasting, and you were right there in the middle of it.
Yeah, well, actually, interestingly enough, because we knew we had acquired the rights to the USGA, which were going to begin the next year for us at Shinnecock, we went to Pittsburgh and went to Oakmont a couple days before that to go see what the U.S. Open was all about, view it, observe it, get our ideas, for the plans that we would have for the next year and how we would cover it. So we actually were there and then flew back to New York to go cover that Game 4. And that was a crazy night, with the whole thing that went down with OJ, and our boss at the time was Dick Ebersol. And, it's pretty common at the network level that if there's breaking news that they can join or preempt pretty much any show that's on the air. But Dick was so powerful at the time that news always had to get permission from him before they could interrupt one of our broadcasts. But when that was going down, it was such big news that they had to come in and do stuff, but Dick wouldn't let them just take over the broadcast. They had to do it in double boxes so that the people at home could still watch the NBA game and watch the chase at the same time. And it was crazy going back and forth to news, and we're still trying to cover it. And by the way, OJ was one of our employees at the time.
I know.
So that was very complicated as well. And it was nuts. I mean, he was actually calling from his car on a cell phone to NBC, to our control room, because he wanted to talk to a couple of our answers, and it was just nuts. But we got through it, and then the Knicks ended up losing in Game 7 when John Starks missed all those 3-pointers. So, that was funny because that was the only Game 7 that we had up until that point. The first 3 championships that we had in the NBA and NBC package were the Bulls winning, those 3 games.
Right.
And they would always end by Game 5 or Game 6. And we finally got our Game 7, and it was a dud. But it was still, it was incredible to get the opportunity to produce those games back then. I was the original producer of the NBA on NBC, and man, they weren't just games. When Jordan and the Bulls were
Right.
playing, those things were happenings. It was huge, just really big deal. And it's kind of cool now that that the NBA and NBC is going to start up again here in the fall.
Well, yeah, we've come full circle. We really have. And of course, we're back at Oakmont now as we get ready for another U.S. Open. And Tommy, I love the Open. I tried, I think, 11 times to qualify, and it was just the most nerve-wracking experience for me. Never could do it, but that's why I appreciate it so much. And here you have all these stories. I mean, obviously the Scheffler and the McIlroys, those are the main guys, right? But when you have a 17-year-old from Georgia who goes 63-63 to earn a spot, you have a dentist from Pennsylvania who was a caddy at Oakmont earning a spot. I mean, Tommy, these stories, they are amazing, and they happen every year at the U.S. Open.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about the Open. It's open to anybody that
Right.
has that's a good player that wants to try to get in. They can. And we spend a lot of Thursday and Friday following those stories. Obviously, we're following the leaders and the stars, but we also try to get all those guys on. The Golf's Longest Day, which just aired on Golf Channel on Monday. They do such a fantastic job with that. Learn about all these guys that we in turn then follow when they try to play, and hopefully they make the cut. And the other thing that I'm a big believer in, that is, if you have earned the right to play in the U.S. Open by qualifying for it, then you have earned the right to be shown on TV at least once. One
Right.
meaningful golf shot. So we make a huge effort, and we always do, get the whole field on the air, all 156 players, by the end of Friday.
Yeah, I've always appreciated that because when I was doing ESPN radio for the U.S. Open, we would always sit in on your production meetings, which I was fascinated by. And of course, I was sitting there with all the guys, Roger Maltby and Gary Koch and Dan Hicks, and it was always really cool. But I remember you always talked about that, how important it was. I mean, you wanted to get every player on at least once. And tell me, that's not the easiest thing because there's 156 guys out there playing.
It is actually quite difficult to get it done. But now, back in the day, we had shorter airtime, so it was more difficult. Now we're on the air from first tee shot to final putt on Thursday and Friday. So much more time on the air to get them on the air. And we're checking them off as we go along. There's a guy sitting right next to me when I'm producing, and I do the afternoon hours, and very fortunate to have Mark Loomis producing the morning hours, and he's doing the same thing, getting everybody on the air, checking their names off. Those players have earned it.
Yeah, Mark Loomis, another guy who does a great job for you guys. All right, Oakmont, Tommy, this is going to be crazy. It's always been difficult. It is the hardest U.S. Open venue. Stroke average 5.6, wing foot a second, Bethpage third. And just by the looks of some of these guys shooting some videos and putting them up, the rough is it's unbelievable. And like Adam Scott the other day played 9 holes, hit all 9 greens, and he was 3 over. He had some 3 putts in there, Tommy. So this is going to be brutal.
Yeah, it will be. We were there for the day before Media Day. We did our final look around to confirm all our camera placements. And then, that was almost 2 months ago now, the rough was so tall, but it was the kind of rough that the ball just goes down to the bottom and just brutal. Just walking around on it, you felt like you're on a cushion. And then of course you step over onto a green, it's rock hard. And by the way, those greens looked absolutely pure, 2 months ago. So they're going to be perfect now too. Yeah, it's crazy. It's interesting for us. Hopefully there'll be some good exciting golf shots too, instead of just all really, really tough shots. We just spent last week up at Erin Hills, very similar setup for the women. And what ends up happening is they'll attempt a birdie putt, and then it'll roll out 4, 5, 6, 7 feet past the hole, and you have to come back then and watch their par attempt. So there's a lot of putting to save par, and you have to try to make that interesting. But I think the stature of the event helps do that. When you can say, this is the U.S. Open, this is our national championship, it makes those par putts just as interesting and exciting.
Yes, there's no question. And I remember being there when DJ beat Shane Lowry and had that crazy penalty assessed at the end of the round on Sunday, which added a little drama. Angel Cabrera played out of his mind those final 3 or 4 holes to beat Tiger that year. So you can always count on some drama at Oakmont, and it's not always going to be birdies, but as you said, it's going to be par-saving putts that ultimately will decide the winner, I think.
Right. Plus, I love the 17th hole, the risk reward nature of
Yes.
that thing. A lot of risk, maybe not a lot of reward, but they'll all give it a go, so I love that. We got to do Cabrera's win. The DJ win was on Fox, but we also got to do Paula Creamer's win there, and we did the amateur that Nick Flanagan won. And so we've had a lot of experience there at Oakmont, and coming down the stretch, it's really good stuff. 15, 16, 17, 18. That one I can guarantee you, there'll be stuff happening there that'll really be interesting.
Well, and it is fun because whenever I come back home, people at the club are like, hey, did you get to play it? I'm like, no. And they're like, well, didn't you want to play it? And I'm like, no. The golf course is just too hard. I mean, listen, for these guys, when I see the best players in the world struggle, why do I want to go out there, even from maybe an up tee? I mean, that's how difficult a test it really is.
Yeah, it is. Very, very difficult. But it's interesting. We get a lot of feedback from the viewers, and they like seeing the best players in the world struggle to win this championship. That they got to step up and hit shots and make putts. And there's a lot of carnage out there, which they can relate to, most of the average golfers, and they see that. I don't think this is the kind of test we want every single week out on the PGA Tour, but for once a year, plus the whole tradition of Father's Day. I hear from a lot of our viewers, that they sat watching the U.S. Open with their dads, and now their kids are sitting with them as they watch the U.S. Open. So it's quite a tradition.
Yeah, it is. And when I was a kid growing up with my late dad, ABC Sports always had it. Jim McKay and the guys, and it was always just a great afternoon to sit and watch. And my dad absolutely loved the game of golf. All right, let's talk about this year on the PGA Tour as we lead into this U.S. Open, because the early part of the year was Rory as he won at Pebble, and then you guys had the Players Championship with that Monday finish. Then he wins the Masters in exciting fashion. And then here comes Scottie Scheffler, healthy finally after that fluky hand injury, and he's won 3 of the last 4, including the PGA Championship. Tommy, I mean, you got the 1 and 2 in the world coming in. That's pretty good, I think, for you, right?
Yeah, it's really good. It's interesting. I just spent the last 2 days out in San Francisco and Santa Clara and producing the Super Bowl pregame show. We have the Super Bowl this year, and everybody was asking me, "Who do you think's going to win the U.S. Open?" It's like, well, I don't know. I thought a few weeks ago it was going to be Rory's for sure. And then the way Scotty's been driving, and the whole key to Oakmont is hitting long drives down the middle. And obviously you got to putt once you get on the green too, but you got to set yourself up and hit these long drives down the middle. So it's tough for me to say if I were to pick one. It's like, I don't know. Could either one of them, and someone will probably surprise us, after all this, but at least the cream is rising as we get towards Oakmont, and man, I can't wait.
Hey, Tommy, did it surprise you a little bit last week at the Memorial? And listen, I'm a Jack Nicklaus guy. I grew up in South Florida. I love the Golden Bear. And when he sat with Scotty at the winners press conference, I was like, wow. He said, listen, Ben Griffin's a nice player. Sepp Straka's a nice player. But Scotty is on a different level, and they know that. And I was like, oh my goodness, that was a telling statement, at least in my mind.
Yeah, I didn't see that actually because I was producing the U.S. Women's Open. But yeah, if Jack is saying that, yeah, that's a really big statement.
I mean, I don't know. I thought, wow, because normally the great champions don't come out and they aren't that verbose about talking about other great players. So I just thought that was incredible. All right, let's talk about your favorite U.S. Opens, Tommy. You've been in the truck for so many. I was there in 2008 at Torrey Pines, and I still tell people when Tiger hit the putt on Sunday to force the playoff with Rocco, the ground shook. I mean, and I wasn't exaggerating. I felt like a mini earthquake was happening. I don't think I've ever been to an event where there was that much power in the audience that were on hand. And of course, Tiger, was getting everybody revved up. But do you have a favorite U.S. Open? 2008 is mine.
Yeah, 2008. Yeah, 2008 is clearly mine as well. And you're right, the San Diego fans that week were unbelievable. But the great thing about that, obviously the story of Tiger, winning that thing on the broken leg was incredible. But the thing, it started on Saturday, and where Tiger made like a 50-foot eagle putt on 13, chipped in for birdie on 17, and made about a 40-foot eagle on 18. And when we got off the air, I said to Dan Hicks, "Can you only imagine if this had been Sunday? If this would have been Sunday, it would have been off the charts." And then we get to Sunday, and it's even better. And Tiger having to make that putt on 18 to force the playoff, it was just great. We had every angle of that thing on the replays nailed, including the ball bouncing on that Poana and barely, lipping in. And then Tiger's first reaction was to look up and do this. And our blimp was looking right down at him. So we had that angle, and then the crowds. And then Rocco, we had him, Mike, going, "I knew he'd make it. I knew he'd make it." So it was a great moment. And we got off the air. And again, we were, so excited about what happened. And then to go to a playoff the next day. And that playoff went to extra holes. You know, even after 18 holes, they're still tied. So it wasn't just, typically if you get a great tournament with a lot of excitement, it's usually just the final couple hours, the back nine on Sunday. This was 3 consecutive days of off-the-charts drama. And I remember the funny thing is when they teed off on Monday morning on the first hole, the grandstand at 18 was already full. So the San Diego people had come and they were sitting there waiting, and they knew they were going to have to wait almost 4 hours for them to finally get around to 18. But that's how pumped up they were about this whole thing. And the fans, they played a huge role in making that so successful and so dramatic. The other funny thing is, a lot of our executives, weren't expecting a playoff, so they flew home on Monday morning on their regularly scheduled flights. And when they got back to New York, to either LaGuardia or to JFK, people didn't get off the planes because that was when they first started having monitors in the airplane. So they were sitting there watching it on TV right about the time that it was going to extra holes, and people weren't getting off the planes. They were staying on the planes after they landed to watch it unfold. It's crazy.
It was crazy, and to think after that win, it took a long time for Tiger to get his next major, right? We didn't know what was going to happen, and of course that just adds more intrigue and more drama to the sport that we love. Hey, I know you're going to be talking about Johnny's final round at Oakmont this week, and it was really one of the distinct pleasures I had years ago at Firestone, and I was sent to interview Johnny one-on-one before he was inducted into another one of many of the Hall of Fames that he's been inducted into. And we sat, and not only did I do the interview, but we just talked, and he told me these incredible stories about that week, that round, that final round, and you've heard them all. But I was intrigued by that day and to this day. To think what he did in that final round back in 1973 was remarkable. And even though the score has been matched, what he pulled off that day, I don't think will ever be matched in major championship golf.
Going to be tough, to shoot a 63, and it happened to be in the final round, and it happened to be on the hardest golf course in the United States, and it happened to be the U.S. Open. So you throw all that together, and the U.S. Open was so meaningful for Johnny because his dad had groomed him to win this championship. It wasn't to win any other event, it was to win the U.S. Open. And he called them champ since he was a little kid, to get this in his head that you're going to be a champion and you're going to win the U.S. Open, and sure enough, he did.
It was amazing, that conversation. And when you look back at the old film and some of the shots, he didn't miss a green that day, Tommy. That was remarkable,
Yep. And it's pretty cool. We're going to have some of his paraphernalia that he was wearing and playing with that day that's going to come from the museum that we can show. And we're also hoping, I think he's coming. And if he is, we're definitely going to see him down in the compound to say hi and maybe even get a chance to get him on the air for a couple minutes.
Yeah, very neat. All right, so NBC Sports, after the U.S. Open, you guys get busy. The Open Championship, Royal Portrush, you got the playoffs, the Tour Championship, which, by the way, is now reverted back to just stroke play, which I think was needed. I think that'll be a big change, add more excitement when all 30 guys now have an opportunity. But then, Tommy, we roll into that Ryder Cup. I had Bones on the show a few weeks ago, and he thinks it's going to be the biggest event in golf. He said there's not going to be anything comparable. Steve Sands, he said, I agree, other than it's up against college football Saturday, the NFL on Sunday, and that's from a ratings perspective, I think. But I think from a mere golf fan standpoint, Tommy, being in New York at Bethpage, and we know what the New York audience brings live, it's going to be pretty astounding, don't you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, we kind of just glossed over Portrush. I got to throw
Yes.
in one.
Okay, please.
There, because having Rory go back to Portrush, where he started that first round with a quad, hitting it out
Yes.
of bounds, because he wanted to win that thing so bad, and I gotta believe he still wants to win that thing so bad. And that golf course is off the charts good.
Yeah.
It's just a spectacular place. So really looking forward to that. Now, yeah, Ryder Cup. It's going to be crazy. I can tell you when we went to go do what we call the survey, that's where we figure out how many cameras we need and where they go and all that stuff. And I was wearing my Golf Channel shirt. And so all the locals there spotted this and they're all coming up, oh, this is going to be so good. There was like F-bombs in everybody's sentence because that's the way they talk,
Yes.
and it is going to be crazy. And I'm excited. Hopefully it's not going to be too crazy, honestly, but I think it's going to be an epic event. That's my opinion.
Well, it will. And right now, if you look at the auto qualifiers, or at least the point system right now, I mean, you have some newbies that'll be on the Ryder Cup team. Russell Henley among them, top 6 right now. On the international or the European side, you have some new guys. DeChambeau is high up there in the points right now. Still waiting for John Rahm. Maybe he'll be a captain's pick. I don't know. But there's going to be a lot of drama with who ultimately makes the team, as always. But I think in this case, it'll add even more intrigue.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. There's a lot of talk, especially at the beginning of the season, that the Americans weren't playing any good. The Europeans were playing great. This is such a, going to affect the Ryder Cup, where they're going to be ready. And I've seen through the years, it doesn't matter how you're playing right now. It only matters what you play like in early September, because you can be playing great, at the British Open and Open Championship, and then by the time you get to the Ryder Cup, you've lost your game. And that's the interesting thing about the Ryder Cup is there's so much pressure, playing for your country or continent and your coach, your captain and your teammates. But when you play in a big time event like a major where there's a lot of pressure, it's because you're playing well. If you've risen up the top of the leaderboard, you're playing well.
Right.
When you get to the Ryder Cup, there's magnified pressure, but you may not be playing well, yet you still have to deal with it. And so it's interesting. We see some of the greatest shots and some of the worst shots that are hit at the Ryder Cup because of that added pressure and how they're playing. And it's funny, when I'm doing a stroke play event, a lot of it is, analyzing the swing or the shots of, the guys that are in contention, super slow-mos and graphics and all that. But when I get to the Ryder Cup, it's not about swings. It's all about capturing the emotion. So it's getting super slow-mos that are on the face shots to see how these guys are reacting after they either hit some miraculous shot or a really poor one.
Tommy, it's interesting, and I grew up playing with Mark Calcavecchia. We're in that same realm, and Calci told me at War at the Shore, he was never more nervous in his life, and he had some squirrely shots, as you described, down that stretch. And then I've interviewed recently Bernard Langer, Miguel Angel Jimenez, and they were talking to me about how playing in the Ryder Cup, that first tee shot just raised the hair on the back of their neck. I mean, these are great golf champions who've won majors, and yet they all talk about the Ryder Cup on this different level, Tommy. I mean, that's, for golfers, to me, that's very telling.
Yeah, another one of the things that we do is we put a super slow-mo camera on the first tee to capture, like, when they're teeing the ball up, to see if their hands are shaking when they put the peg in the ground, or their hands, or what their facial reactions are. And we make a package out of that. Typically, the veterans that have played in past Ryder Cups, you don't get that. But the new guys, for sure, it's really interesting to see that stuff.
Hey, Tommy, as we wrap it up, and again, I appreciate the time, as you get ready for another broadcast on NBC Sports, any new innovations this week? I mean, obviously the drone has changed, and these shots that you guys have are just amazing now, that just creates these visuals of the golf course that we've never seen before. Even though those towers back in the day on ABC Sports, man, oh man, those were way up in the air. But what do you got planned this week? Anything new and of course you have the bunker cam and all that. Anything new this week?
Well, the tracing drone is the biggest thing, that we started using during the playoffs last year, and used it, in various really big events. We had it last week at the Women's Open. And that thing is the most new and telling and great innovation that we have. It worked so well last week that Aaron Hill's very, very similar look and feel to Oakmont, with the wide open vistas and no trees, and it was great. And then we'll not only have that drone, we have 2 other drones that are there as well. So 3 drones going. Our pinpoint greens animation, because that's the other thing, is that projects the break of a putt. And that's going to be hugely important next week at Oakmont. Those things. Yeah, we got bunker cams at 8. The 8 is the par 3 that's like 270.
Yeah.
We have bunker cams at 17 because, again, the guys go for the greens, go for that green, but they're going to miss that green a lot, and it's surrounded by bunkers. So we'll have all that. Yeah, and it's great. All these innovations have really, I think, helped golf tremendously. For the viewers. So that's what we're trying to do, put the best show in the air for the viewers.
Well, it's the best graphics ever, and obviously technology continues to just go to different levels, and you're right. It helps the game in so many ways, and I think, listen, right now the ratings are up for the PGA Tour. Rory and Scotty doing what they're doing has helped the game tremendously, and the graphics and what you guys are doing has just elevated our game in a big way. So as you can appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yep. It's a great game. It's so much fun to be a part of a broadcast just like the way you do. It doesn't get any better.
Yeah, it really doesn't. So, well, Tommy, have a great week. I guess sleep is just not going to be part of the equation this week, right?
Not really, but that's all right. I drink a lot of Pepsis to get
I know you do
on the air. So those will be going.
Yeah, for our audience now, Tommy never takes his eyes off the screen. He just puts his arm back, and they give him another Pepsi. So that's pretty good, Tom. Of course, you've been doing it a long time. They know your routine.
Yeah, they know the routine.
Tommy, we appreciate it, my friend. Have a great week at the U.S. Open, and thank you so much.
All right, Doug, we'll see you there.
All right, buddy. All right, Tommy.